welcome to this second session, which talks about inclusion by design, the next frontier of global AI innovation. As we have been seeing in terms of the discussions in the previous two sessions, there's a question about in terms of concentration of AI ecosystems in certain geographies, also concentration of certain resources. So really the question of inclusion and democratization of access to AI really becomes important. So what is inclusion by design as such? As both the ministers said that AI is not just about algorithms. AI is also about people, and in fact, that's what the theme is, AI for people. So really inclusion by design puts equity as an underlying principle in terms of the AI development. It's an approach that relies on multilingual data sets, affordable, accessible compute resources, strong digital public infrastructure, and appropriate governance models, which really consider the real-world experience of the communities that the AI models are supposed to be serving to. So in that sense, really, we have to build trust and integrity in the development of the AI systems so that they really cater to the welfare of the societies as such. So in that sense, what we'll do in this particular session is we will look at the role of nations, institutions, communities in the integration of idea of inclusion in the overall development of the AI ecosystem as well as the life cycle. But we'll also specifically look at the how the nation states can really embed inclusion in terms of the development of the AI models as such. And as Shub narrated, we really have a strong panel, a representative panel from both India and France. So let me do one thing. What I'll do first is that I'll ask each of the panelists to really give like first 4 to 5 minutes to spend in terms of what is their idea of the inclusive AI. And maybe I can start with Ambassador Verdier, with you.
I was supposed to speak second.
Okay, so
no problem.
But, yeah.
So good evening, good afternoon. That's a bit awkward because we don't see you from the stage, so that's a bit bizarre. I'm very happy to be there with my friends. So if we want to speak about inclusion, we could speak about a lot of things. The nature of the model itself, does he respect cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, etc., the accessibility of the model, etc. So I would prefer to focus on one thing, because I think very seriously that we have to face the fact that we did enter in a world of monopolies. Yes, there are a huge variety of models and experimentation, etc. But did you notice that 92% of the global market cap in AI is in US and China? 92%. So Europe, plus India, plus Japan, plus Korea, plus Africa, plus Latin America is 8%. That's the situation. That some of those companies are giant, and that some of them did clearly, not the companies, but the owners, did clearly say that democracy is not the best model. And they want monopolies, they don't want to respect human rights, international law, social rights, etc. So in this context, I think that we should focus less on the technology itself and more on the owner, the agenda, and their strategy. Because the very same technology can be used to empower the people or to capture the economy and the people. And we are at risk. And so that's why I think that if we want to, we need to find a way to make AI accessible, fair, open, etc. But it cannot just be through regulation. We need to think a bit about regulation, but we know that they won't respect the international order. We know this. So we need to implement something in a stronger way than just edicting principles. And probably, as usual in digital, because code is law, it will be a question of implementation, infrastructure. And sorry, I'm reading my... So the question is, can we conceive concretely an infrastructure for inclusion? And here, because this is a 3 minutes first speech, I just want to say that there are a lot of lessons to learn from the Indian DPI movement. So we have the answer. They are architectural lessons. Maybe you will go further. But those principles of openness, modularity, frugality, interoperability are very important. But I want to add that there are also a lot of political lessons to learn. I really believe that the DPI movement did open a new way of thinking about the connection between state, society, and market, something that we could call government as a platform, something that is not so far from the long French tradition of public service. So, for example, and a very fast, the DPI movement enables the implementation of the key principle of public services like neutrality, continuity, equal access, etc. You can design this through an infrastructure. The DPI movement enabled to implement some regulation, and here I confess that there is something brilliant with the DEPA, for example. The first time I've heard about the DEPA, it was with Siddharth. And he told me, your GDPR is brilliant. This principle that data should travel with a consent is wow, that's something very French and very brilliant. But why did you conceive such a burden for the entrepreneur? You could conceive an infrastructure for innovation with the exact same principles. And the DEPA did try to not only to protect privacy, but also to unleash innovation. So there is a second lesson to learn. Sometimes regulation can be a resource if you think carefully. The second lesson is that DPI can be, I cannot read my, can be designed and used as a tool to stimulate market innovation. And the fourth idea, and maybe the most important, that's an idea from Sharad, it can prevent, when you have a two-side market, which is very often the situation with digital, you have the risk of a rogue intermediary. So Uber, you don't know if Uber works for you or for the taxi driver. And it takes money to both, and you cannot go in court because he said, no, that was because the other did ask for. So this risk of rogue intermediary is a main problem for governments. And here, with a very small layer of public infrastructure, you can fix this, and you can ask to decide, do you work for the driver or for the client? Decide and do your job. So those are lessons that can be learned, and of course, you see where I'm coming to. We need to conceive what is a DPI for AI. We have some first breaks. I finish. For example, of course, the DEPA is an infrastructure for, can you say, confidential computing? The French Health Data Hub is an infrastructure, the French Health Data Hub is for confidential computing. The DEPA can allow to implement some very interesting research. And we have some vehicle. Anne Bouvreau did mention the current AI Foundation. But frankly, if we observe the current situation, we need to go further. This is just the beginning of the journey. But clearly, I think that the only question is how to enforce the possibility for inclusion. This is not just about the model. This is political, and this is about power.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Engineer, if I can come to you and tell us about this entire thought process behind the DEPA, the data empowerment and protection architecture, but also the idea of how to really make people as the stakeholders, and that's really the idea of inclusion as such.
So DEPA originates in the idea of DPI, and DPI in India, as my friend Sharad would tell the story, starts from looking at people at the atomic level and asking, how can you create a large-scale system which benefits individuals? Because this whole idea that individual or the company is at odds with the government is rather illogical. You have to learn to take a systems approach. It's one connected collective system. And they are not supposed to be opposing each other. They are supposed to be collaborating in creating the society. So the DPI comes from that philosophy. How do you create large-scale inclusive systems? And DEPA is born out of the same idea, right? So when India started thinking about DPI and iSpirit focused on some aspects of it, we started thinking about how do you create a people-centric DPI and give identity to people first, right? Then how do we move money around? Because economics drives a lot of the society. So how do we move money around? Then came the question of how do we move data around? Because we had a choice. We could go and look at how do we move material things around, goods around. We do have a system called ONDC geared towards that. But we realized that we should focus on the virtual world, on the digital world, little bit more than we should focus on the physical world. So we started creating DEPA to address that question. Now, how does it make it inclusive is that you remember that somebody was pointing out that there is no data sharing even when the idea is benevolent. People are sharing data. People want to share data in order to build something good. Yet there is a whole class of regulations which are preventive in nature. And why are they preventive in nature? Because you suspect that harm can emerge from data sharing. Technically speaking, please understand that data is a highly inert object. If I took health data of a large number of people and left it on the table, it is very unlikely that any harm would come to anybody out of that in that corpus, because it takes a great deal of work to get some meaningful thing out of the data, even to cause harm, right? Or to do good things. What we saw with the AI models, the reason why we are here is this growth of LLMs, is that we do have to collect data to a certain level. If you collect small pools of data, you are getting only small results. In order to get that large expansion that LLMs brought about in the 2020 to 2023, we needed scaling. And that is something that we were very keenly aware of when we started designing DEPA. Even before the LLMs, we were aware of the fact that in order to build a system-wide solution, we had to bring together data which is lying siloed in many, many places. And India, like you heard Dr. Bouron speak about it, that there's a diversity of data. That is quite right. There is a diversity of data, and in the world there is a diversity of data. However, it is all tightly locked up. It is very difficult, even for people who are in the know, to pull out these pieces of data and make a common model out of it. So we said, let's focus on this, because somebody else, other parts of DPI in India have solved the problem of inclusively creating identity, inclusively solving the problem of payments. I don't know if all of you know about UPI, all right? Somebody in the fintech would obviously know. It's a very large-scale structure dealing with billions of transactions, right? The question is, how do you do the same for data so that AI models could be built? Right? And this is pre-LLM days. We've been building DEPA over the last 6 years now. The most important thing that we focused on was that data by itself is harmless, it's inert. However, when data starts coming together, somebody with ability can actually go in and pull out useful information, and somebody with a malevolent intent can pull out things which could cause harm. Now, how do you enable data sharing in spite of that possibility? That's what DEPA focuses on. And the idea was to use technology. If technology is going to be the problem, then technology is going to be the solution, right? At those large scales, you cannot have human observers solve problems. The scale is too large, the speed is too large, the digital world moves too fast. Humans are not natural residents or natural participants of the digital universe. The machines are. And therefore, we have to bring the machines to our side and use technology to produce a scalable infrastructure where you could include data of all kinds, financial data, healthcare data, and so on, and build useful products. That is the heart of DEPA. Now, how DEPA does it is to use a lot of cryptography and strong technology. But as Henri was saying, it's not a matter of technology. It's the way you think about it and the way you use it. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. Ms. Nicole, if I can come to you. Project Liberty works a lot extensively on the issues of digital governance. So how do you look at this idea of inclusion, especially when it comes to the people as the stakeholders?
Thank you very much to Aria for the invitation. Very happy to be here and very looking forward to be in India myself for the first time, and to all the events that we'll organize and the discussion we'll have here. I want to use this opening session that I have to talk about something that is very inclusive, which is non-technical. It's all about AI narrative. What's very interesting is that AI narrative is dramatically opposed. You have either a vision that AI is going to bring us to a humanity 2.0, where we're going to be extra intelligent, with a lot of purpose, super productive. And this is often a narrative that is being pushed by those building the technology, especially coming from Silicon Valley. And what's interesting with that is that there is almost no way to discuss it, because it's mostly laying and coming from belief system that AI will make us better. And that is why we can never answer, will AI allow us to not work anymore? Because it's not a technological question, it is a political and societal question. So you have this very polarized vision of AI that is extremely hopeful for a future where we're all gonna be better. And the other side of the coin is you have the exact opposite, which is AI will lead to the end of the world. And it's really hard to induce nuance in that debate. And I think the first step to having inclusive AI, it's by default to have discussion about it. And it's very hard for common people who have no technical knowledge to actually be able to contribute to this debate if the only two options are so black and white. And there's actually, I find, to illustrate this this narrative that is very funny. It's a Financial Times article, and the graph is very funny. I hope you can all have a look at it. The title is literally, AI could end scarcity and humanity, or boost growth by 0.2 percentage points. So we see how we're talking about AI is completely irrational. It's mostly discussions that are led by either belief, either by fear, but nothing is really constructive in the discussion. So that's how I really want to enter this discussion, is that the first step to inclusion, and I think I didn't hear so much about narrative today, is really to recalibrate the narrative to allow more people to talk about it, not exclusively engineer. And also specifically, if we're talking about governance inclusion, this is all very much governance issue. To not let only engineer develop that kind of thinking and that kind of framework as well, because we know how it will end up.
Great, thank you. Mr. Shihan, you have long experience in terms of implementing the innovation policies across sectors and geographies. As the pace of AI innovation accelerates, what kind of ecosystem conditions should be there to really ensure that the benefits of this AI innovation are spread across the communities?
Well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that question. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I think given contributions OECD tried to make to the French AI Action Summit, the ones we are preparing now for the India AI Impact Summit, it's a real pleasure to be here at this bridging event between the two of those, and to share with you some of the lessons that we have on that very topic. Maybe trying to bring in some of the evidence base, right, into the narrative that we can about how we can have an AI system that is more inclusive along many, many different dimensions that I'm sure we can discuss here. I'll just say from our point of view from OECD, we've been working in the areas around AI for at least the last decade. Some of my colleagues in the room have been working on it even longer than that, I know. And the basis being a set of shared principles around AI and AI recommendations that from their basis promote the use of AI to support people, right, and the planet as well, and with a clear principle and recommendation as well about maintaining strong international collaboration in the development of AI governance systems, but also in trying to build out the AI system and an AI narrative that can work for all. As we now can move beyond principles into turning those into practice, we're trying to better understand what it does take to build the AI ecosystem that can allow AI to diffuse much more broadly across our societies, across our economies, across our countries as well. And we've been laying out a set of identifying a framework of underlying kind of needs and steps to get to the point where we can have AI that is much more broadly and widely adopted. And those consist of, fundamental pieces like connectivity infrastructure, right? Other infrastructures on top that I think fit very much into the notion of digital public infrastructures, including the data infrastructure that was described, as well as then the human skills and of course some financing to help all of to pay for all of that we need to do to build out the AI system in a much more broad-based, much more inclusive way. And just to give a sense of that, I know we talk quite often about connectivity divides, and we know that there are great divides globally, right? A large percentage of the population without broadband connectivity. We've been doing work looking at even within countries, within many of those represented in the room here, France, India, others for sure, about broadband divides that exist even between rural and urban areas in countries. So if we want to have AI that can work for all within our countries, we also need to have connectivity to all parts of those countries. In our latest data looking at G20 countries, we find that the mobile download speeds are about 30% higher in urban areas and in rural areas. And in India, that disparity is up at around 46, 47%. And we need to close that gap as well if we want to have much more inclusive AI. Because that means where can firms locate, where can people access the services that are going to be built using AI services and systems. I mean, the second set is the other elements that we would put around digital public infrastructure, looking at issues around, for example, compute infrastructure, data sets to train and use AI systems. And from an inclusivity point of view, I think in our latest data, we find that still about 64% of the open source data sets that are available are in the English language, about 4% in French, right, and 3% in Chinese, according to some sources. So if we want to have more inclusive AI systems that work in a variety of different operational settings, we need to make sure that the data, if you will, that they're trained on, the quantitative as well as the qualitative data they're trained on, is much more inclusive and reflective. And I think there's a lot of room for government policies to try to promote that kind of data access and accessibility. We've also been doing some work looking at issues around AI compute. And as we heard, I mean, where are the AI markets concentrated? AI compute capabilities are still a little bit more widespread, but they're still limited in their availability. So we found about 43 countries that we've looked at that have significant, using a new methodology, we're happy to share with you, about 43 economies that have large public cloud compute from only about 9 providers. And again, different in their abilities, in those cloud compute resources that are able to be used for training AI systems versus those that are only about 9 of those can be used only for inference, not for training purposes. So again, we need efforts to try to improve the availability of compute capacity as well as multilingual data. Finally, to say around human capacity. And we know we need human capabilities along the entire value chain, if you will, to be able to develop AI systems that will work for all, to be able to deploy them in all sectors of our economy and in firms of large and small sizes. And that takes quite a bit of degree of capabilities in terms of AI skills. What we also find is we look at data about for demand and job postings, right? It's not just about the technical skills, and maybe this comes back a bit to the narrative, right? But it's good management skills and social science skills to understand how AI can be best deployed in different operational settings. While at the same time, if we want AI systems to be developed in a much more globally inclusive way, we need to ensure that the research population and the technicians and the scientists and engineers are also being trained and are available in a number of different countries. Using some metrics, I mean, looking at research publications, they're still highly concentrated in a small number of countries, and that reflects the fact there's still a lot to do in terms of mobility of the research community and efforts, again, that governments can help promote and a policy perspective to help ensure that there's a training of a cadre of people who can develop and then implement good AI systems. I'll stop there now for now, but happy to join in some other discussion of these issues.
Thank you. Mr. Anthony, as a tech entrepreneur, how do you pursue this idea of inclusion by design?
Thank you for the question. So now, these days, while we are speaking about inclusion, Personally, I believe that now we have moved away from inclusion of just users, and now we are talking about making the aspect of inclusion in the creation of AI. That is making AI more participatory as far as the creation is concerned. You look at the last couple of decades, we can very clearly say that now technology has become the most important driver. And as far as citizens and users are concerned, adoption and inclusion is happening at a very rapid rate. You look at internet itself, I'm just giving some numbers. Now there are almost 8 billion people on the planet. Globally, there are almost 6 billion internet users. India with 1.4 billion people, that is 1/6 of the world's population, got around 1 billion internet users. So almost 70% of the people now use the internet. And in the advanced economies, it's almost 100%. You look at smartphones again, almost 1 billion smartphones are there in India. Like globally, there are over 5 billion smartphones. So people are using technology and people have been using it for a while. And you look at any of these sectors, something that is very common is these are all very concentrated sectors. For example, smartphones itself. There are 4 or 5 from Apple to Samsung to Huawei, and that's most of the market, 90%. Even other sectors which people are familiar with, for example, the aviation sector. You have Boeing and Airbus which are having 90% of the market share, but aviation sector is doing well everywhere. But now we come to this aspect of AI. Again, the sector is very concentrated, where globally there are 2 countries that are leaps and bounds when compared to anyone else. And even when we are looking at its supportive ecosystem, including compute or chips or any of those aspects, again, it's a fairly concentrated ecosystem. And in AI, that creates a lot of other ramifications because unlike other technology, this is a technology that is all pervasive across all sectors and every aspect of our life also. So countries or even corporates that are very strong in AI with large user bases, they can change how they can influence how people think. Countries can influence how other countries' people think, which affects the fabric of democracy. And some aspect which we really overlook is it impacts the evolution itself. Because last time I was in Silicon Valley, one of the biggest points of conversations here, we speak a lot on regulations. But there people are talking about brain-computer interfaces and human-computer interfaces, etc., which definitely creates a lot of other ramifications. So in such a scenario, it is very important that we make AI and AI creation participatory. And this is where countries like India, countries like even France, many other countries which are not US and China, they actually have the capacity to create ecosystems where different aspects of AI can be made more participatory. Where datasets, as one of the most important aspects of AI is datasets. So some of the inherent biases of datasets at the time of creation itself can be made more transparent and fair. Similarly, other countries, right now you look at other global south countries, there are almost 100 countries in the global south, in Africa, Latin America, etc. And there isn't a lot of work in AI that is going on there. They are all big consumers, but there isn't a lot of work that is going on there. So all these aspects can be brought together, and there is a third way, which is, bringing countries together who can contribute at different stages of the ecosystem. It need not be just developing algorithms, but certain developed countries, like upper income countries with good scientific strength, they have the capacity to create algorithms. Similarly, certain other countries have the capacity to create data centers. Certain other countries, including India, have the capacity to create large data sets, which, just like Europe, we have a lot of similarities with Europe, which is we are a country with 29 states, 22 official languages, a lot of sub-languages, and different kind of data sets are created, which is wide labeled, and it can be created in a structured manner also. And these kind of lessons can be shared with third countries who can also learn from similar lessons. So a certain ecosystem can be created which makes things more participatory, and that will be able to give solutions that will be more inclusive and democratic also. And that is what we believe is what, as a country, India is now doing. And it is one of the most important initiatives during our AI summit too.
Thank you. Ambassador Wadia, if I can come to you. You have served as France's Digital Ambassador also previously. So what specific initiatives France has taken to address this particular aspect in terms of ensuring that the AI which is deployed is more inclusive, more participatory, is also ensuring that people are able to benefit from this particular technology?
Again, I could pick a lot of initiative. I did mention Current AI, the foundation that was launched during the last summit. Maybe I will share with you one small project, but very interesting, the Café IA coffees. So another idea we have is that a lot of businesses, even small businesses, even small shop in the countryside, will decline if they don't adopt AI. And that we cannot encourage this adoption if people don't, that's about inclusion, speak about it, contest, etc., etc. So we have a body that is named the Conseil National du Numérique that was supposed to be the advisor of the government, but they decided that's a very strategy of empowering the people. They said, if you want to organize a conversation about AI in your commerce, in your company, in your city, whatever, in your association, if you're in your theater, we will help you. So you do organize, we can send an expert, you can send materials, and we had thousands of debates on AI everywhere in the countryside. But it was a real and serious decision, because I can tell you 20 years ago, 30 years ago, France was not a big fan of robotization because we wanted to save jobs. So we did not robotize a lot of factories, and then we lost the factories and we lost the jobs. So we don't want to make the same mistake again. So we want to be sure that the society agrees to adopt AI. And for this, we think that they need to have proper conversation in their cities regarding their questions, and they should organize this themselves, but we can inspire or send resources. So that's just an example, but it shows the philosophy.
That's very useful. Thank you so much. Mr. Engineer, if I can come to you. You talked about the DPA, you talked about the DEPA, but as you implemented that particular vision into reality, what kind of challenges you encountered which really made your job difficult?
Specifically with respect to DEPA, the first challenge was how to create something that would really be scalable. It's actually easy to use a lot of technology to solve this, but we had two problems. One is scalable from the perspective of the size of the problem, and then, as Jerry was pointing out, how do we make it scalable so that it would reach everybody? So our constant focus is on how do we include a very large part of the world into the system, and that was the core of DEPA design. How do we do it in such a way that all these cross-border interactions would be possible and people would not be pegged down? Then we had to worry about this problem about data sets. But there are some interesting questions. For example, as Jerry was saying, a large percentage of the data that is used to train models are in English. But you have to ask the following question. Does it really matter? Because English is just one of a symbolic systems, but we are actually talking about a world that is non-linguistic. A language is a layer on top. Yes, of course, a language also encodes a certain cultural ethos and a certain way of looking at the world. But suppose we built a system with 50% English text and then we used 5% French text. Would that work? Is the question. And in India, it is a significant question because as he was saying, as Anil was saying, there are too many languages. Anytime we use one language, somebody will complain that they are not being included, right? So this was a problem that we came across over and over again. So we wanted to address this as well. So as Henri was pointing out, there are so many dimensions to this, but these were some of the issues. Yes.
Can I make a short comment?
Yes,
It does matter. And make the experience. You can do it yourself. Ask to ChatGPT, who did create aviation? They will say the American Wright brothers. Ask to Mistral, who did create aviation? They will say the French engineer, Clément Adler. So it does matter.
I agree. Yes.
Mistral knows the patent office, the French patent office. So he knows the patent. ChatGPT doesn't know the French patent.
Thank you. I also do want to bring in the audience into this conversation. But before that, I want to come to Ms. Nicole and this interesting idea that we had during the conversation earlier. Governments, not as regulators, but as enablers of the inclusion. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a very important point, because we often frame AI as this disruptive technology that is rewriting global power structure. And I'd rather say that AI is actually reinforcing the current power structure. If we look at the capitalization of the big tech companies, it's basically the launch of ChatGPT in 2022. Alphabet has made 845 billion more in terms of its valuation. Meta and Amazon, it's 1.1 trillion more. And likewise, in terms of geopolitics, I think artificial intelligence has only reinforced big powers like the US and China, with, of course, Europe and India catching up and hopefully going faster and faster together. So the thing is that if we are thinking that inclusion is going to come from this shift that we have in new technology, I think we are in the wrong. But the good thing, and that's one of the projects that we're leading with the Global Solutions Initiative, is we are leading government interviews across the world. We've talked with Mexico, Brazil, Japan, Cambodia, France. We talked to many governments. And one thing that we realize is that in the government approach to infrastructure, it's quite the opposite from the private sector approach to infrastructure or to technology. Because ultimately, government are trying to build a technology that reflects its governance. Whereas private sector, they build technology and they think of governance after, usually when something goes wrong. So it's a really good thing. But it should be used way more by government, because the problem, and especially in Europe, is that government has seen its position in the cycle of innovation way too often as an ex-post regulator, one that is here, and that is true, and that is very necessary, don't understand this wrong, but one that needs to punish basically the bad guys. And government have especially a really important role to support and to enhance the alternative business model that are out there, the small and medium enterprise that are being built on a daily basis that could counter those kind of big companies that are not having this good governance model in place, and are not building AI for people. So we're really, through this project, we're really looking at how basically government can shape markets, not only through ex-post regulation, but also through this ability to identify those that are building positive innovation and to reinforce it and do some procurement with it, and so on. And this is fundamental, what I said about government building technology based on their governance model and not the other way around, because ultimately adoption will come from an alignment with transparency, with privacy, with data agency, and so on. It will not come from, look, we have the latest LLMs. The population doesn't care about this. But what they care about is, we talked about health data. Will it be secure enough? And so government have the good approach. They just need to start doing it more. And one thing that we find, and this report is not yet published, so you're hearing all this firsthand, is that all government that we talk to understand the necessity of having digital infrastructure in place, especially in the age of AI and because of AI acceleration. The problem is that there are very few that know exactly how to do it. And very often there is the India model or the Estonian model, and they kind of have to pick between the two. So it's also very important that between government there is cross-collaboration, and what we're doing with France and India is a very good thing to continue.
Thank you. Mr. Shihan, you spoke about this entire idea about how the government has to play that role in terms of inclusion. But there is also this dimension of spreading AI literacy, right? And where does your work intersect, particularly on that front, where people also have to be aware in terms of what kind of AI systems they are encountering and how they can use it better for their own betterment?
So I think a couple of answers to that. I mean, so before I highlighted some of the evidence that we try to bring into the diffusion debate, if you will, and the adoption debate. I think the other element is that we can bring in is the convening power, right, that we have. And just as you were saying, Sarah, I mean, there's more than the Indian model and the Estonian model, right? There are many different models that governments are taking to try to promote AI adoption, AI diffusion, and AI governance systems that work and are attuned to their own needs. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to provide at the OECD is a platform for good exchange on those issues, right? We know that there are common issues and concerns around AI development and deployment that span national boundaries. So what we can do, and we've starting with the AI principles, again, which have been adopted not just by OECD countries, but by the G20 countries within the global partnership on AI. We have close to 50 countries, right, that have adopted a common set of principles. And now we're working at the next level. How do we work together to promote development, diffusion of these technologies across our countries and across our economies in ways that reflect our national values and a shared set of values for doing this as well. We're very proud that we were able to combine forces between the OECD and the GPA with great guidance and participation from India and leadership in that effort itself, certainly from France and Canada as well in driving that merger together. And that's given us a very powerful platform now for looking at issues about how do we introduce AI into different sectoral applications. We've been doing some work looking at everything from mobility to manufacturing. Maybe it's the robotics issue coming back as Henri had mentioned, to healthcare and others. And can we work together to identify common solutions to address issues around privacy that comes up in particular in some application areas, but can we also understand how to better adopt those to local circumstances and local needs? So we're in the process now at OECD of organizing a series of what we're calling regional co-creation workshops. We've done these already in Southeast Asia and in Latin America. We'll be going in a couple of months to Africa, and then I think back to the Southeast Asian region to better understand both the good examples that are coming up for effective policy approaches and solutions to the shared challenges, as well as to better understand what the differences are and concerns in the Southeast Asian region versus the Latin American region and elsewhere. And I think having those fora where we can bring not just policymakers, but experts in AI and AI application together to share that experience is going to be important in carrying it forward.
Thank you. I'm going to come to the audience, so please be ready with your questions. But before that, last question from Mr. Anthony. You spoke about this geopolitical competition, and and not just the competition, but also the concentration in terms of the resources, in terms of computing. Frankly speaking, do you have any optimistic view in terms of global governance? Because that's now the right, what should I say, the bellwether in terms of the need of the humanity and imperative to really bring together these two dominant ecosystems together and really achieve something when it comes to the inclusive AI.
Thank you for the question. So we look at two aspects here. And one, there is a reality also, like now you're talking about geopolitics. And recently also, the United States just pulled out of around 66 global treaties. And it's a country that is going more and more insular. And at this moment, both the big two in AI, I would say, both US and China, they're fairly far away from the rest of the world in many aspects. And it will be very difficult to get either of them to get into a structure which one side thinks which will stifle their innovation. And like Honorable MP Mr. Tiwari was telling earlier, like it's a geopolitical instrument also, which gives them a lot of strategic heft. And they wouldn't want to be in a situation where that can be controlled also. So there are realistic limitations as far as a global framework is concerned. But at the same time, everybody across who are stakeholders and do understand that there should be certain guardrails and there should be some guardrails to prevent misuse in many areas. I'll just give one little example. Like, for example, occasionally I do use ChatGPT and Grok. I type, let's say, what is the some figure, and it gives good data with a reference point also, which makes life very easy. But at the same time, it can be misused in a lot of manner, where now, especially with generative AI, people can create deep fakes more easier. Now, malware programs can be made more potent by generative AI. Now, a lot of people are using Grok to create, let's say, more photos of people. There are a lot of misuses that are happening. And there are quite a lot of areas where civil societies, countries, policymakers can do come together and create basic yardsticks. And finally, accountability has to start from the creators of the algorithms. Because once something is created and it is on, it is very difficult to then put the genie back into the bottle. But when people who are the creators of the algorithms, when certain checks and balances on some basic ground rules can be created there, that will make people's life easier. And that is something which is a possible reality. And that is what summits like the AI Summit can do, where there are global leaders from across the world, policymakers, head of the states, even leaders of the AI world. They can come together and say that we can do certain things to make our world a better place and a safer place.
Thank you. On that optimistic note, let me turn to the audience. Please identify yourself and then ask your question.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Nidhi Premkumar. I am a student of International Governance and Diplomacy at Sciences Po Paris. My question pertains a bit to the training and the post-deployment aspect of the AI models, specifically the LLMs, which I think Mr. Shehan and Mr. Antony spoke about a bit. So do you think that there is a bit of a virtual echo chamber that is being created, where when we're looking at training language learning models or generative models, where they are using the information and data that is already available, and increasingly more of this data is being generated by AI itself. So does this cause a scenario where you're excluding opinions and perspectives and voices from those areas which have not been digitized, which have not been introduced into the digital realm itself? And do you foresee any kind of possible solutions to address that particular problems with inclusivity?
Thank you. Yeah.
I can give it a shot. I think what you're mentioning is actually very true. And on top of this, you have a lot of evidence that showed that LLMs that are exclusively trained on synthetic data are more wrong than LLMs that are trained on actual data. The issue, though, is that the biggest LLM have already scrapped all of the world's data, and we're not producing data fast enough for LLMs to be better, basically. So they highly rely on synthetic data. And that's where I want to go back to your point that was very interesting, is that data on its own means nothing. Data is very contextual and needs to be put together. And that's where, at the institute where I work, we look at alternative business model, and we look at data stewardship model that could be more interesting. For a while, the narrative was protect your data because your data is valuable. But the truth is that your data is only valuable if it's pulled with your data, and it's pulled with your data. And there are a lot of data stewardship models that actually could benefit both people and both AI models, because it would provide AI models with greater quality data that are coming directly from people that are generating this data. But the counterpart is that these people that are producing this data would get rewarded for it, compared with a model today where, I mean, you're just using the LLMs, you're going on the web and you're giving kind of your data for free. But again, going back to my first point of narrative, the narrative that needs to shift is that your data on your own is worth very little. If you were to sell your data towards the end of the year, there's been a lot of research produced on it. It would be worth like a couple hundreds of dollars at most. But it's different if you put your data with experts on that topic, and on that topic, because it would be differently valuable. But this is still, to my knowledge, more so pilot project than actual companies that are being built on this, unfortunately.
Thank you.
I just want to reinforce that point. Please remember that the digital data that we have today on which we train our AI models, including LLMs, is a very small fraction, and it is a limited representation of the world as we know it, especially 5,000 years of civilization. So it's less than, I would say, 1 to 2%. So expecting these systems, and we have run out of data. I would say that in 2026, we probably don't have data sets anymore, which are really useful, right? The only thing that we are hoping for is the fact that we have noticed something peculiar in LLMs. The more you train them with the same data, they start behaving differently after we cross certain thresholds. So that's why I began by saying, perhaps there is one more threshold to cross, where we take our existing data sets, we train them, and they reach reasoning beyond language. So that the point that Henri was making, that they're giving non-factual information in different languages, can be addressed. But this is still an open problem.
If I can very shortly, so I totally agree with both of you. Just to add two things. First, you have what you named the echo chamber issue. We also observe some weaponization of AI. And for example, I don't know if you know the new Pravda topic. So for example, we have evidences that Russian did develop some data sets that you cannot access through Google, but that are seen by AI model to jeopardize the model and to promote propaganda. So we need to find a sustainable business model. And that's also a problem of global economy. If we don't pay for creation, what will we become? If we just have some people taking control of the economy and that don't agree to co-finance the first creation, that's a dead way. So we need to find something creative, because we cannot ask for contract with every creator, with every human being. So we need something more smarter. But we need to find a sustainable business model for the global economy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just to say, I think there may be a role for policy in there too. Large language models may be running low on data to do, but I think much of the data that can inform decision-making, right, can inform further developments in healthcare, in education, and other areas of societal relevance are still not available, right, to be used in training AI systems, much less, maybe more so if we could develop them in terms of applying them and using them internally. But I think there are business models that we need to do. There's more technology we need to put in place. I mean, we're doing a lot of work at OECD now on privacy-enhancing technologies, right? How can you find ways to make data more accessible that have sensitivities around them and make them accessible in ways that don't betray the confidentiality and so forth of the underlying data set? So I think there's opportunity for creating a lot more data. Needs to have incentives in place to help that as well, that we can better train AI models, not just for generic kind of LLMs that we have today, but for more specific applications that are going to have a lot of impact on our societies and human lives.
And in that point, that is why DEPA is intrinsically a privacy-preserving, scalable architecture. So the question that the gentleman was asking, how can France and India share, let's say, brain data to promote brain research? DEPA is designed to address the problem that Tom was talking about, because data will not flow without trust. And this privacy is one of the greatest trust barriers. So the whole idea is, how do we use technology to cross that?
Thank you so much. So on a lighter note, not only we have ran out of the data, but also the time, because I can also see the timer for the next session already there. So thank you so much for all the panelists for really insightful remarks. Audience, please give them a big applause. Thank you so much. Over to you, Shub. Thank you.